You know, we all think we know the story of David and Goliath. It's the ultimate underdog story, right? But what if the story we've all been told isn't the whole story? Today, we're going to peel back the layers of this ancient showdown. We're going to look at what history, archaeology, and even psychology tell us about what might have really happened in that valley. Okay, let's get into it.
I mean, the setup is just legendary, isn't it? You've got this young shepherd, and his only weapon is a sling. And he's facing off against this terrifying armor-plated giant. It's a tale that has shaped how we think about courage against impossible odds for literally thousands of years. But here's the question we have to ask. Was David really the underdog?
So if you go to the source, 1 Samuel 17 in the Bible, the picture it paints is, well, it's pretty bleak. For 40 straight days, every morning and every evening, Goliath comes out and just taunts the armies of Israel. And for 40 days, an entire army, all the way up to their king, is just frozen, paralyzed with fear. All they see is an enemy they absolutely cannot beat.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to start with the giant himself. And it turns out, the moment you start digging into the actual ancient evidence, the story gets, well, a lot more complicated. It seems like a pretty simple question, right? But the answer, well, it's surprisingly tricky. See, the original documents don't exist anymore. All we have are copies, made by scribes over hundreds and hundreds of years. And those ancient copies, they don't all say the same thing. And this is where it gets really fascinating. We have a major disagreement in our earliest sources. The Masoretic text, which is the standard Hebrew Bible most people use today, says Goliath was 6 cubits and a span. That's a mind-boggling 9'9". But our oldest sources, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Greek Septuagint, say he was 4 cubits and a span. That's around 6'9". Now don't get me wrong, that's still a huge dude for that time period. Think modern NBA center. But it's not a mythical giant. It's a human being.
So, you see, we basically have two different Goliaths. One is a monster out of a fantasy novel, and the other is a very large, very intimidating warrior. A lot of scholars now think that the smaller height is the original one, and that somewhere along the line, a later scribe changed the number from a 4 to a 6 just to make David's victory seem even more incredible.
So that's the giant. Now let's flip the script and talk about David. We have this image of him as just a simple shepherd boy, but that view totally masks who he really was. He wasn't just brave, he was a brilliant strategist who saw the fight in a way that nobody else did.
What David did is a textbook case of what military experts call asymmetrical warfare. It's when the weaker side refuses to play by the stronger side's rules. David was smart enough to know he couldn't beat Goliath in a sword fight, so he didn't fight him with a sword. He completely changed the rules of the game.
And what was his weapon? The sling. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. A slingshot, right? A kid's toy. No way. The ancient sling was a devastating military weapon. A trained slinger could launch a stone with the stopping power of a modern handgun, and they could do it with deadly accuracy from a couple hundred yards away. That's a greater range than most archers had. The best armies of the day, the Assyrians and the Persians, they had elite units of slingers.
So when you look at it like this, the whole fight changes. Goliath is basically a walking tank. He's weighed down by probably 100 pounds of armor, and he's armed for hand-to-hand combat. David, he's a mobile artillery unit. This wasn't a contest of strength. This was a slow-moving infantryman going up against a long-range projectile warrior. In that fight, David had the massive advantage.
So why was David the only one who could see this? The answer is all in his head. It's psychology. King Saul and his entire army were paralyzed by what's called cognitive appraisal, how they interpreted the threat. They saw an unbeatable giant. But David, he reframed the whole problem. He'd fought off lions and bears to protect his flock. He'd faced deadly threats before and won. That gave him what psychologists call self-efficacy, a deep belief in his own ability to get the job done. That's why he could act while everyone else was stuck in fear.
And you can hear this incredible mindset in his own words. He's not just trash-talking, he's laying out his entire worldview. He's saying, this fight isn't David versus Goliath, it's God versus Goliath. His faith let him see the situation not as a terrifying threat, but as an opportunity.
Now, for centuries, you could dismiss this story as just a myth, a legend. But here's the thing, modern archaeology has started digging up evidence that grounds this story in a very real, very tangible historical world.
So get this, in the Valley of Elah, the exact place the Bible says this battle happened, archaeologists started excavating a site called Khirbet Qeiyafa. And what they found there is just stunning. A massive, heavily fortified city dating to the precise time of King David. This find completely blows up the old idea that David's kingdom was just some small backwater tribe.
So what you're looking at here is a model of one of the city's huge gates and some of the actual pottery they dug up on site. This was no small village. This was a powerful, organized administrative hub. It's physical evidence of a strong, centralized kingdom right where and when the Bible says it was.
And they didn't just find pots, they found weapons. This here is a stash of iron weapons, including these long, curved swords found right there at the site. This proves that the people of David's time were not just simple shepherds, they were part of a complex society that knew all about sophisticated warfare. David was a product of this world.
So when you start putting all these different pieces together, the textual debate, the military strategy, the psychology, and the actual archaeology, a completely new and much richer story starts to come into focus.
Let's just quickly recap the main takeaways. First, the giant of the legend might actually be an exaggeration of a very large but very human warrior. Second, David wasn't some lucky kid, he was a highly skilled fighter who picked a weapon system that gave him a huge tactical advantage. And third, this isn't a fairy tale land. The story is set in a real place with real archaeological discoveries that support the biblical account of David's kingdom.
The author Malcolm Gladwell, who famously took a deep dive into this story, he just put it perfectly. Goliath's size, his armor, his spear, all the things that made him look strong were the very things that made him weak. They made him slow, they made him a target, and they locked him into one kind of fight, a fight David simply refused to have. And really, that's the profound lesson of the real David and Goliath story. It teaches us that what looks like strength isn't always strength. Real power often comes from seeing a problem differently, from choosing the right strategy, and from having the courage to believe in it when everyone else is telling you you're crazy.
Centuries later, the great artist Caravaggio painted this incredible piece, David with the head of Goliath. And he did something amazing. He painted his own face as Goliath's severed head. And on David's sword, he put an abbreviation, HASOS. It's believed to stand for the Latin phrase, humilitas occidit superbium. Humility kills pride. It's this timeless statement on the story's true meaning. Goliath's arrogant power was no match for David's humble confidence.
So that leaves us with a final question for ourselves. This story has lasted for thousands of years because we all face giants, right? In our jobs, our health, our relationships. But maybe, after taking a closer look, the real challenge isn't about being strong enough to fight our giants head on. Maybe it's about being wise enough to see them for what they really are.